Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the Aurora's Dawn and watched the stars drift by. The ship moved through space like a gentle giant, its engines humming quietly in the peaceful darkness. Jake had been captain for 12 years now, and every day felt like a gift. No battles to fight, no enemies to worry about, just the endless wonder of exploring new worlds. "Captain, we're approaching the Kepler system," said his navigator, a young woman named Amy Foster. She smiled as she spoke, her fingers dancing across the control panel with practiced ease. The crew of the Aurora's Dawn was like a family, and Jake felt proud to lead them on their missions of discovery. Jake nodded and walked to the main viewing screen. The Kepler system spread out before them, 5 planets orbiting a yellow star much like Earth's sun. Their mission was simple: catalog any new life forms, check for signs of ancient civilizations, and report back to the Federation. It was the kind of work that had kept humanity busy and happy for 3,000 years. Dr. Lisa Carter looked up from her workstation, pushing a strand of brown hair from her face. She was the ship's chief scientist, a woman who could speak 7 alien languages and had spent her life studying the creatures that shared the galaxy with humanity. Her latest project involved working with the crystal beings from Arcturus Prime, strange life forms that existed as living gems and communicated through light patterns. "Jake, I'm getting some interesting readings from the 3rd planet," Lisa said, her voice filled with excitement. "The surface shows signs of water and possibly vegetation. We might have found another garden world," Jake smiled. Garden worlds were always special discoveries. They were planets where multiple species could live together, sharing resources and knowledge. The galaxy was full of such places now, peaceful havens where humans worked alongside aliens to build better lives for everyone. The year was 5025, and humanity had spread across 847 star systems. Earth remained the heart of human civilization, a beautiful blue marble where children learned the history of their species. They learned about the old days, when humans fought wars and conquered territories. But those days were long gone, replaced by an era of cooperation and understanding. On Earth, the buildings reached toward the sky like crystal spires, their walls made of materials that could repair themselves and clean the air around them. Parks filled with plants from 100 different worlds created rainbow gardens where families picnicked under artificial suns. The cities hummed with the quiet efficiency of a people who had learned to live in harmony with their environment. Admiral Sam Rodriguez sat in his office on Luna Station, looking out at the Earth below. He commanded the Federation Defense Fleet, though the word defense felt almost meaningless now. His ships carried no weapons beyond basic shields and stun devices. The most dangerous thing in his fleet was probably the cargo bay doors, which could accidentally crush someone if they weren't careful. Sam often wondered what his ancestors would think of the modern fleet. The old record spoke of massive warships with names like Devastator and Vengeance, vessels designed to fight and destroy. Now his ships had names like Peaceful Explorer and Harmony's Gift. They were beautiful vessels, sleek and graceful, built for science and discovery rather than war. The Treaty of Eternal Harmony had been signed 3,000 years ago, when humanity finally grew tired of fighting. The document sat in a museum on Earth now, its pages yellow with age, but its words still powerful. It declared that humanity would never again wage war against another species, that they would settle all disputes through discussion and compromise. The treaty had worked beyond anyone's wildest dreams. The Galactic Cooperation Council now included 23 different species, all working together to explore the universe and share knowledge. Humans served alongside creatures that looked like walking trees, beings made of pure energy, and reptilian philosophers who could live for thousands of years. On the agricultural world of New Eden, Pete Johnson walked through his fields in the early morning light. The crops grew in neat rows, their leaves catching the sunlight and turning it into food. But these weren't just crops for humans. Pete grew nutrition pods for the silicon-based creatures from Vega, protein crystals for the energy beings from Sirius, and sweet fruits that the bear-like aliens from Polaris loved to eat. Pete's farm was like thousands of others scattered across human space. The Federation had learned that the best way to maintain peace was to make sure everyone had enough to eat. Food brought people together, whether they were human or alien, carbon-based or something else entirely. His daughter Kate was away at school on Luna, studying at the Interspecies Academy. She sent him letters every week, filled with stories about her alien classmates and the things she was learning. Kate wanted to become a diplomat, to help maintain the peace that had made her father's quiet life possible. The Academy was a marvel of cooperative engineering. Humans had designed the basic structure, but aliens had contributed their own knowledge to make it perfect. The classrooms could adjust their atmosphere to accommodate different species. The libraries held information in formats that various alien senses could understand, and the cafeteria served meals that could nourish any kind of life form. Kate's favorite teacher was Professor Vex High, a being that looked like a cross between an octopus and a flower. Vex High taught the history of galactic civilization, explaining how different species had learned to work together over the centuries. The professor often said that the current era was the most peaceful in galactic history, a time when violence had become almost unthinkable. Back on the Aurora's dawn, Jake Morrison prepared for another routine day of exploration. His ship was one of hundreds like it, scattered across the galaxy on missions of discovery. They found new worlds, contacted new species, and slowly expanded the borders of known space. It was important work, but it was also safe work. The most dangerous thing they might encounter was a solar storm or a navigation error. The crew went about their duties with the casual efficiency of people who had never known real danger. Amy Foster plotted their course through the Kepler system. With the confidence of someone who had never worried about enemy attacks, Dr. Lisa Carter prepared her instruments to study whatever life they might find, secure in the knowledge that any aliens they met would be peaceful and curious. Just like humanity, the communication systems crackled with messages from across human space. Trade ships reported successful deliveries, research stations shared their latest discoveries, and families sent messages to loved ones on distant worlds. The galaxy had become a vast neighborhood where everyone knew everyone else, where conflicts were resolved through conversation rather than violence. Jake looked at the pictures on his desk, images of his wife and children back on Earth. They lived in a world where war was just a word in history books, where the greatest challenges were scientific puzzles and diplomatic negotiations. His children would grow up never knowing the fear that had once driven humanity to build weapons and fight battles. The Aurora's dawn continued on its peaceful mission, carrying its crew toward another routine day of discovery. The universe stretched out before them, vast and welcoming, filled with wonders waiting to be found and friends waiting to be made. For 3,000 years, this had been the human way of life, and there was no reason to think it would ever change. In the cargo bay, supplies sat neatly organized for their mission. Scientific instruments, communication devices, and samples of human culture to share with any new species they might meet. There were no weapons, no armor, no tools of war. Humanity had outgrown such things, evolved beyond the need for violence. The ship's computer hummed quietly as it processed data from their sensors, looking for signs of life in the system ahead. Its programming was focused on peaceful contact, protocols, methods for communicating with alien species and establishing friendly relations. The idea that they might encounter something hostile had been removed from its databases generations ago. As the Aurora's dawn approached the third planet of the Kepler system, Jake Morrison felt the familiar excitement of discovery. Soon they would know if this world held life, and if it did, they would make new friends among the stars. It was a good day to be human, in a galaxy where every day was filled with peace and possibility. The first sign that something was wrong came at 3 in the morning, ship time. Jake Morrison was sleeping peacefully in his quarters when the emergency alarm began to sound. The gentle chime that usually woke the crew for routine duties was replaced by a harsh, urgent tone that no one on the Aurora's Dawn had heard before. Jake stumbled out of bed and grabbed his uniform, his mind trying to process what could cause an emergency alarm. Equipment failure, maybe, or a navigation error. In 3,000 years of peace, humanity had almost forgotten that alarms could mean real danger. Dr. Lisa Carter was already on the bridge when Jake arrived, her face pale in the blue light of the emergency systems. She looked up from her station, with confusion in her eyes. "Jake, we've lost all contact with the research station on Kepler 442b, she said, her voice tight with worry. "They were supposed to send their daily report 6 hours ago. Now they're not responding to any of our signals." Jake frowned and walked to the main communication panel. The research station on Kepler 442b was Dr. Carter's special project, a joint operation between humans and several alien species. They were studying ancient ruins that had been discovered on the planet's surface, artifacts that might be older than any known civilization. "Maybe their equipment broke down," Jake suggested, though something cold was forming in his stomach. "Or maybe the ruins are interfering with their communications somehow." Amy Foster looked up from her navigation station, her young face creased with concern. "Captain, I'm not detecting any of their automated beacons either. Even if their main systems failed, the backup transmitter should still be working." Jake felt the weight of command settling on his shoulders. For 12 years, the most serious decision he had made was which planet to visit next. Now he was facing something that felt different, something that made his instincts whisper warnings he had never learned to understand. "Set course for Kepler 442b, he ordered. "Maximum speed." The Aurora's Dawn changed direction smoothly, its engines pushing the ship faster than usual through the empty space between stars. The crew went about their duties quietly, but Jake could see the tension in their movements. None of them had ever faced a real emergency before. Dr. Carter stood at her workstation, trying to reach her research team through every communication method she knew. The silence from Kepler 442b was complete and terrifying. Her research partner, a being called Zixthul from the Regellian Collective, had been like a second family to her. The thought that something might have happened to him made her hands shake as she worked. It took the Aurora's Dawn 18 hours to reach Kepler 442b. As they approached the planet, Jake could see that something was terribly wrong. The research station, which should have been a bright cluster of lights on the planet's surface, was dark. No signals came from its location, no signs of life or activity. "Take us down," Jake ordered, his voice steady despite the fear growing. In his chest, the Aurora's Dawn descended through the planet's atmosphere, its sensors scanning the surface for any signs of what had happened. The planet looked normal from space, its blue oceans and green continents unchanged from their last visit. But as they got closer to the research station, the details became clear and horrible. The research facility had been destroyed, not damaged by accident or natural disaster, but deliberately torn apart by something with terrible purpose. Buildings lay in ruins, their walls blown apart from the inside. Equipment was scattered across the landscape like broken toys. Jake felt his stomach turn as they landed near the wreckage. In all his years of peaceful exploration, he had never seen deliberate destruction before. The sight was almost impossible for his mind to process. Dr. Carter was the first to suit up and leave the ship. She ran toward the ruins of the main laboratory, calling out names in both human languages and alien tongues. Jake followed her, along with Dr. Ben Clark, the ship's medical officer, who also served as their counselor for dealing with stress and trauma. What they found among the wreckage was worse than Jake could have imagined. The bodies of the alien. Researchers were scattered throughout the ruins, killed with surgical precision. Each had been struck down by weapons that cut through their alien forms like they were made of paper. The technology was advanced, far beyond anything Jake had ever seen. But the human members of the research team were different. They were alive, huddled together in what remained of the emergency shelter. Their bodies were unharmed, but their minds had been shattered by whatever they had witnessed. Dr. Clark knelt beside Dr. Helen Price, the human leader of the research team. Her eyes stared at nothing, and when she spoke, her words came out in broken fragments that made no sense. "Shadows moving," she whispered, her voice like broken glass. They knew. They knew which ones were human. They knew which ones to kill, and which ones to leave. Jake felt cold fear creep up his spine. The attack had not been random violence or some kind of accident. Someone had come to the research station with a specific plan, targeting the aliens while leaving the humans alive. But traumatized, Lisa Carter found the body of Zixthel near the main computer terminal. The Rigelian's crystal-like form had been shattered into 1,000 pieces, but his final actions were clear. He had tried to send a warning message before he died, his hand still reaching for the communication controls. Ben, what could do this to people's minds? Jake asked as he watched Dr. Clark try to calm the surviving humans. The three researchers sat together, but they couldn't speak coherently about what had happened to them. Dr. Clark shook his head, his face grim. "I've never seen trauma like this, Jake. It's like they witnessed something so terrible that their brains refuse to process it. They keep talking about shadows and creatures that move too fast to see clearly." Jake walked through the ruins trying to piece together what had happened. The security cameras had been destroyed, but some of the automated systems had recorded fragments of data before being shut down. The timestamp showed that the attack had lasted less than 20 minutes. But in that time, an entire research facility had been obliterated. Amy Foster called out from near the archaeological dig site. "Captain, you need to see this." Jake followed her voice to where the research team had been working on the ancient ruins. The dig site itself had been left untouched, but something had been removed from the main excavation area. The ground showed signs of careful extraction, as if someone had taken exactly what they wanted and left everything else behind. Dr. Carter joined them at the dig site, her face streaked with tears for her lost colleagues. "They were studying some kind of warning beacon," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Zixthel told me about it in his last message. It was covered in writing from multiple ancient civilizations, all saying the same thing." "What did it say?" Jake asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know the answer. Lisa pulled out her datapad and showed him the translation that Zixthel had been working on. The symbols were old beyond measure, carved by hands that had turned to dust millions of years ago. But the message was clear in its terrible simplicity. The Devourers return when the galaxy grows soft. Jake stared at the words, his mind struggling to understand their meaning. For 3,000 years, humanity had believed that peace was the natural state of the universe, that violence was an aberration that intelligent species could overcome. But these ancient warnings spoke of something else, something that saw peace as weakness and weakness as an invitation. Dr. Ben Clark finished his initial examination of the human survivors and joined the others at the dig site. His face was pale, and his hands shook slightly as he spoke. "I've given them sedatives to help them rest, but Jake, what they're saying doesn't make sense. They keep talking about humans in advanced armor, moving like ghosts through the facility. They say the attackers looked human, but moved like no human ever could." Jake felt the universe shifting around him, all his certainties crumbling like sand. The peaceful galaxy he had known his entire life suddenly felt fragile and false, as if it had been built on foundations that were never as solid as they seemed. As the Aurora's Dawn prepared to leave Kepler 442b, with its cargo of traumatized survivors and terrible news, Jake Morrison stood on the bridge and looked out at the stars. They no longer seemed friendly and welcoming. Instead, they felt like the eyes of predators, watching and waiting for something that humanity had forgotten how to recognize. The age of peace was ending, and Jake didn't know if his species would survive what came next. The news from Kepler 442b spread across human space like fire in dry grass. Within days, every communication channel buzzed with reports of the massacre. For 3,000 years, humans had lived without fear, but now that ancient emotion came flooding back with crushing force. Jake Morrison found himself at the center of a storm he never could have imagined. The Aurora's Dawn docked at Luna Station, and immediately he was surrounded by officials, reporters, and military personnel who hadn't been called military personnel in centuries. Everyone wanted to know what had happened, and Jake had no good answers to give them. Admiral Sam Rodriguez met Jake in his office, the same room where Sam had spent years managing peaceful exploration missions. Now the walls felt different, as if the peaceful decorations and star charts had become reminders of how unprepared humanity really was. "Jake, I need you to tell me everything again," Sam said, his voice heavy with worry. "Every detail about what you found on that planet." Jake had told the story a dozen times already, but he went through it once more. The destroyed research station, the dead aliens, the traumatized human survivors who could barely speak about what they had witnessed. Each time he told it, the story became more real and more terrifying. "The survivors keep talking about humans in advanced armor," Jake said. "But not humans like us. They move too fast, too precisely. Like they were something else wearing human faces." Sam leaned back in his chair and stared out the window at Earth. The beautiful blue planet looked the same as always, but something fundamental had changed in the universe. The safety that humanity had taken for granted was gone, replaced by questions that no one knew how to answer. On Earth, the Federation Council met in emergency session for the first time in over 200 years. The Great Assembly Hall, designed for peaceful discussions about trade and scientific cooperation, now echoed with angry voices and fearful debates. Kate Johnson sat in the public gallery, her studies at the Interspecies Academy suddenly seeming naive and pointless. She watched as human representatives argued with their alien colleagues about what the attack meant and what should be done about it. The Rigelian representative, a crystal being whose colors shifted with emotion, glowed angry red as he spoke. "The attack targeted our people specifically. This was not random violence, but calculated murder. We demand action from the Human Federation. But what action could they take?" The Federation Defense Fleet consisted of exploration vessels and cargo ships. They had no weapons, no trained soldiers, no experience with real combat. For 3,000 years, humanity had deliberately forgotten how to fight. The Altarian delegate, a peaceful creature that looked like a walking tree, swayed gently as it spoke in its musical voice. "Violence only breeds more violence. We must seek understanding, not revenge. Perhaps these attackers can be reasoned with." Kate felt anger rising in her chest as she listened to the debate. Her alien classmates were talking about abandoning their shared colonies, about retreating to their home worlds for safety. The cooperation that had defined her entire life was crumbling before her eyes. Dr. Lisa Carter worked day and night in her laboratory, trying to make sense of the data they had recovered from Kepler 442b. Fragments of information painted a disturbing picture that she was only beginning to understand. "Ben, look at this," she said to Dr. Clark, who had been helping her analyze the psychological profiles of the attack. "I've been studying communication intercepts from the past 6 months. Several alien species have been having private discussions about humanity." Dr. Clark leaned over her shoulder to look at the translated messages. What he read made his blood run cold. The aliens had been talking about humans as the dormant ones and the sleeping warriors. Some of the messages dated back years, suggesting that certain species had been expecting something like this to happen. They knew, Lisa whispered. Some of them knew that our peace wouldn't last forever. They've been preparing for this moment. While we lived in ignorance. The second attack came 3 days later, and this time there were witnesses who survived with their minds intact. The mining colony on Vega 7 was smaller than the research station, with only 47 people working. The asteroid extraction operations. When the attackers came, miner Bill Hayes managed to hide in an emergency shelter and record everything through the security cameras. The footage was grainy and difficult to make out, but it showed figures in black armor moving through the colony. With deadly efficiency. They killed the alien workers with precision weapons, but they left the human miners alive. Before leaving, one of the attackers removed his helmet and looked directly into the security camera. The face was human, but wrong. Somehow, the features were perfect, too perfect, as if someone had tried to create the ideal human appearance, but had missed something essential. The eyes were cold and empty, holding no emotion that anyone could recognize. After the massacre, the attacker left a message burned into the colony's main computer. The words appeared in letters of fire across every screen in human space. Weakness will be purged. The strong will endure. Prepare yourselves. Admiral Rodriguez stared at the message on his office screen and felt something he had never experienced before. It was an emotion his ancestors would have recognized immediately, but which had been bred out of humanity over 3 millennia of peace. It was the desire to fight back, to meet violence with violence. "Amy, get me a connection to the Defense Archives," he told his aide. "I want to see everything we have on military history and combat tactics." The Defense Archives were located deep beneath Luna Station, in vaults that hadn't been opened in generations. The automated systems that guarded them had to be convinced that Sam actually had the authority to access information that had been classified for security reasons that no longer applied. What Sam found in those dusty digital files shocked him. Humanity's military history was far more extensive and sophisticated than most people realized. Their ancestors had been warriors on a scale that defied imagination, capable of strategies and tactics that could devastate entire worlds. But the knowledge was just information now, stored in computers that no living human knew how to apply. The ships, the weapons, the training programs, all of it was theoretical. No one alive had ever built a warship or trained soldiers for real combat. Kate Johnson made a decision that would change her life forever. She left the Interspecies Academy and traveled to Earth, where she joined a growing movement of young humans who refused to accept helplessness as their fate. They called themselves the Awakened, and they spent their days studying the military archives that were finally being opened to the public. In hidden meeting rooms across human space, young people gathered to learn about tactics and strategy, about weapons and warfare, about the dark arts that their species had deliberately forgotten. They studied the history of human conflicts, learning about generals and battles that had been relegated to dusty academic courses. "We can't just sit here and wait for them to destroy us," Kate told a room full of her former classmates. "Our ancestors knew how to fight. That knowledge is still inside us somewhere. We just have to remember how to use it." But remembering was harder than anyone had expected. The instincts for violence and warfare had been carefully suppressed for so many generations that most humans couldn't even imagine harming another intelligent being. The very concept of organized killing felt alien and wrong. Dr. Carter made another disturbing discovery while analyzing the attack patterns. The mysterious humans who had carried out the massacres had technology that was decades ahead of anything the Federation possessed. Their weapons, their armor, their ships, all of it suggested a level of military development that should have been impossible. "Jake, I think we're dealing with humans who never stopped developing military technology," she told Captain Morrison during one of their regular briefings. "While we were building a peaceful civilization, someone else was perfecting the art of war." The implications were terrifying. Somewhere in the galaxy, there was another branch of humanity that had chosen a different path. They had continued to evolve as warriors while Federation humanity had grown soft and comfortable. Now they were coming to judge their peaceful cousins and finding them wanting. Admiral Rodriguez stood before the Federation Council and presented them with a choice that no human had faced in 3,000 years. They could continue to hope for a peaceful solution while their colonies were destroyed one by one, or they could try to remember how to be warriors again. "We have the knowledge," he said, his voice echoing in the great assembly hall. "Our ancestors left us the blueprints for warships, the manuals for military training, the strategies for defending ourselves. But we have to choose to use them." The debate that followed would rage for days, but Kate Johnson already knew what the outcome would be. She could see it in the faces of the humans around her, the slow awakening of instincts that had been sleeping for millennia. Her peaceful species was remembering how to be dangerous, and the galaxy would never be the same again. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the Aurora's Dawn as his ship approached the edge of known space. 3 weeks had passed since the second attack, and the Federation had finally authorized him to lead a task force to find the truth behind the mysterious attackers. His ship now carried weapons for the first time in its history, crude devices hastily built from old blueprints that no one really understood how to use. The task force consisted of 12 ships, all converted exploration vessels now armed with whatever weapons the Federation could manage to build. Admiral Rodriguez had wanted to send more ships, but these were all that could be made ready in time. The rest of the Federation fleet was scattered across human space, trying to protect colonies that might be the next targets. Dr. Lisa Carter worked at her science station, monitoring long-range sensors for any signs of the attackers. The trail had led them to the galactic rim, beyond the boundaries of civilized space where few ships ever traveled. The region was filled with dense nebulae and gravitational anomalies that made navigation dangerous even for experienced pilots. "Jake, I'm detecting something unusual ahead," Lisa said, her voice tight with concentration. "There's a massive structure hidden in the Horsehead Nebula, something that shouldn't be there according to our star charts." Jake felt his heart racing as he looked at the sensor readings. The structure was huge, easily the size of a small moon, and it was definitely artificial. After centuries of peaceful exploration, humanity was about to encounter something that had been deliberately hidden from them. "Take us closer, but keep us ready to run if we need to," Jake ordered. "Amy, plot 3 different escape routes in case this goes bad." Amy Foster nodded from her navigation station, her fingers dancing across the controls as she calculated hyperspace jump coordinates. The young navigator had changed in the weeks since the first attack, becoming harder and more focused. The innocent girl who had once plotted courses to garden worlds was learning to think like a soldier. As the Aurora's Dawn approached the hidden structure, its details became clear and shocking. It was a space station unlike anything in Federation. Records, built for war rather than peace. Weapon platforms jutted from its hull like thorns, and docking bays large enough for battleships scarred its surface. This was not the work of a peaceful civilization. "Captain, we're being scanned," reported Lieutenant Tony Walsh, the communications officer. "Someone knows we're here." Before Jake could respond, the communication system crackled to life. A voice spoke in perfect Federation standard, but with an accent that no human had heard for 3,000 years. "Federation vessel Aurora's Dawn, you are trespassing in exile territory. State your business or prepare to be destroyed." Jake took a deep breath and activated the ship's main communication array. "This is Captain Jake Morrison of the Federation Exploration Service. We're here to investigate attacks on our colonies. We want to talk." There was a long silence before the voice responded. "Very well, Captain Morrison. You and a small delegation are permitted to board our station. But be warned, Any aggressive action will result in your immediate destruction. Jake selected Dr. Carter and Dr. Clark to accompany him to the station, along with 2 security officers who had been hastily trained in the use of the new weapons. As their shuttle approached the docking bay, Jake could see that the station's technology was far more advanced than anything the Federation possessed. The docking bay was filled with ships that looked like nothing Jake had ever seen. They were sleek and deadly, built for speed and combat rather than exploration. Each vessel bristled with weapons and armor, designed by people who understood that the universe could be a dangerous place. General Marcus Stone was waiting for them in the docking bay, surrounded by soldiers in black armor that made them look like living shadows. He was tall and lean, with silver hair and eyes that seemed to see everything. When he spoke, his voice carried the authority of someone who had spent his life giving orders that meant life or death. "Welcome to Haven Station, Captain Morrison," General Stone said, his tone polite but cold. "I am General Marcus Stone, commander of the Human Exile Forces. We have much to discuss." Jake felt overwhelmed as he looked around the station. Everything was built for efficiency and warfare, from the defensive positions that covered every corridor to the soldiers who moved with deadly precision. These people lived in a world where violence was always possible, where safety came from strength rather than diplomacy. General Stone led them through corridors lined with weapons and military equipment that Federation humanity had forgotten how to make. Soldiers saluted as they passed, their movements sharp and precise. These were warriors, Jake realized, people who had spent their entire lives preparing for combat. "You're wondering who we are," General Stone said as they walked. "We are the descendants of humans who refused to sign your Treaty of Eternal Harmony 3,000 years ago. While you chose peace, we chose to remain strong." Dr. Carter looked around at the military displays with fascination and horror. "You've been out here all this time, building weapons and training soldiers while we built gardens and art galleries." General Stone nodded. "We have watched your Federation grow soft and weak, forgetting that the universe is not always kind to those who cannot defend themselves. We hoped you would never need us, but we prepared for the day when you would." They entered a briefing room where holographic displays showed star charts and tactical information that made Jake's head spin. The exiles had been monitoring the entire galaxy for centuries, tracking threats and preparing for dangers that Federation humanity had never imagined. "The attacks on your colonies were not meant to hurt you," General Stone explained. "They were meant to wake you up, to remind you that peace is not the natural state of the universe. We had to make you remember what you had forgotten." Dr. Clark leaned forward, his face angry. "You killed innocent people just to prove a point?" General Stone's expression remained cold and unmoved. "We killed alien researchers and miners while leaving your people alive. If we had wanted to destroy your colonies, Captain, there would be nothing left but ash and radiation." Jake felt sick as he began to understand the truth. "You're the ones who have been attacking our colonies. You're the mysterious humans in advanced armor. Some of our people carried out those missions, yes," General Stone admitted, "but only to prepare you for what is coming. The real threat is not us, Captain Morrison. We are trying to save you from something far worse." General Stone activated the holographic displays, showing images that made Jake's blood run cold. Massive structures moved through the void between galaxies, each one larger than entire star systems. They consumed everything in their path, turning matter into energy to fuel their endless journey across the universe. "We call them the Devourers, General," Stone said. "They are ancient beyond measure, older than any civilization we know. Every few million years they return to this galaxy to feed. The last time they came, they destroyed every peaceful species they encountered." Dr. Carter studied the images with growing horror. The ancient ruins on Kepler 442b, the warning beacons. They were left by the survivors of the last feeding. General Stone nodded grimly. The only species that survived were those that maintained their warrior traditions, those that could fight back against the devourers. Every peaceful civilization was consumed, their planet stripped bare to feed the hunger of creatures that exist only to devour. Jake felt the universe shifting around him once again. How long do we have? Our long-range sensors detect the first scout ships at the galaxy's edge, General Stone replied. Perhaps 2 years before the main force arrives. Your Federation has that long to remember how to be warriors, or humanity will join the list of extinct species that chose peace over survival. The briefing continued for hours as General Stone showed them tactical analyses and strategic projections that painted a grim picture of the coming war. The Devourers were not just powerful, they were intelligent, adapting their tactics to overcome any defense. Only species that could think like warriors, that could embrace the art of warfare, had any chance of survival. We have been preparing for this day for 3,000 years, General Stone said. We have weapons and ships that can hurt them, soldiers trained to fight creatures that defy imagination. But we cannot win this war alone. We need the Federation, with all its resources and population, to stand with us. Jake looked at the tactical displays showing the defensive preparations that the exiles had been making for centuries. Hidden bases, weapon stockpiles, and military installations scattered across the galactic rim. They had built an entire civilization dedicated to warfare, all in preparation for a threat that Federation humanity had forgotten existed. Will you help us remember how to fight? Jake asked, the words feeling strange in his mouth. General Stone smiled for the first time since they had met, but it was not a pleasant expression. Captain Morrison, we are going to teach your people things that they have spent 3,000 years trying to forget. By the time we are finished, the Federation will remember why humanity was once the most feared species in the galaxy. As Jake and his team prepared to return to their ship with news that would change everything, he realized that the peaceful universe he had known his end. Admiral Sam Rodriguez stood before the largest gathering of human representatives in 3,000 years. Every colony, every world, every space station had sent delegates to Earth for the emergency assembly. The great hall that had once echoed with peaceful debates about trade agreements now buzzed with urgent discussions about survival and war. The holographic displays around the room showed images that no human had ever wanted to see. Massive alien structures approaching the galaxy's edge, each one the size of a small planet and hungry for destruction. The Devourers were coming, and humanity had perhaps 18 months to prepare for a war unlike anything in their history. We face a choice that will define our species forever, Sam said, his voice carrying to every corner of the hall. We can maintain our peaceful ways and likely face extinction, or we can remember what our ancestors knew about fighting and survival. The debate that followed was unlike anything in Federation history. For the first time in millennia, humans argued about weapons and warfare, about the morality of violence and the necessity of strength. The older generation, including Pete Johnson, who had traveled from New Eden, spoke passionately about the horrors of war and the importance of maintaining their peaceful values. I have lived my entire life without violence, Pete said when his turn came to speak. My father and his father before him knew only peace. Are we really going to throw away 3,000 years of progress because we're afraid? But the younger generation, led by voices like Kate Johnson, had different ideas. Kate stood before the assembly with fire in her eyes, speaking for millions of young humans who refused to accept helplessness as their fate. With respect to my father and his generation, peace only works when everyone chooses it, Kate said. The Devourers didn't choose peace, they chose hunger. If we don't learn to fight, we'll become their next meal. The vote, when it finally came, was closer than anyone had expected. But by a narrow margin, humanity chose survival over principle. The Federation would learn to wage war again, and pray that they could do so without losing their souls in the process. Captain Jake Morrison found himself at the center of humanity's transformation from explorers to warriors. His ship, the Auroras Dawn, was taken to shipyards that had been hastily converted from building peaceful exploration vessels to constructing instruments of war. What emerged weeks later barely resembled the ship he had known. The new vessel that bore the name Defiant Dawn was a hybrid of Federation technology and Exile weapons systems. Its hull was armored with materials designed to withstand the energy weapons that the Devourers used. Its cargo bays had been converted to launch bays for fighter craft that no human had ever flown in combat. Dr. Lisa Carter stood on the bridge of the Defiant Dawn, wearing a uniform that felt strange and uncomfortable. The peaceful scientist had become a military analyst, studying alien psychology and trying to understand how creatures that existed only to consume could be defeated. The Exile intelligence reports show that the Devourers communicate through some kind of hive mind, she told Jake as they reviewed tactical data. They share information instantly across vast distances, which makes them incredibly efficient at adapting to new threats. Jake nodded, though much of the military terminology still felt foreign to him. In the space of months, he had gone from peaceful explorer to warship captain, learning skills that his ancestors had deliberately tried to forget. The transformation was necessary, but it felt like losing part of what made humanity special. The integration of Federation and Exile forces was not easy. General Stone's people had spent 3,000 years preparing for war, while Federation humans struggled to understand concepts like tactical formations and weapons targeting. The cultural divide between the two branches of humanity was vast, and sometimes bitter. Kate Johnson found herself serving as a bridge between the two groups. Her quick mind and natural leadership ability had earned her a commission as a lieutenant, despite having no formal military training. She worked with both Federation recruits and Exile veterans, trying to forge them into a unified fighting force. The Exiles think we're soft and weak, she told her fellow Federation officers during a training session. And maybe they're right about some of us, but we have something they don't have. We know how to work together, how to cooperate with different species and different ways of thinking. The cooperation with alien species became one of humanity's greatest strengths in preparing for the war. The Rigelians, despite their anger over the deaths of their researchers, provided crystal technology that could enhance human weapons. Bear-like aliens from Polaris offered their knowledge of defensive tactics, while the energy beings from Sirius shared insights about fighting creatures that existed partially outside normal space. But not all alien species chose to stay and fight. The peaceful Altarians began a mass exodus toward distant galaxies, taking their advanced environmental technology with them. Several other species followed, choosing to flee rather than risk extinction in a war they might not survive. Let them go, General Stone said when some Federation officials wanted to convince the fleeing aliens to stay. In the coming fight, we need people who choose to be here, not those who stay only because they're afraid to leave. The first contact with Devourer scout ships came 16 months after the emergency assembly. The engagement took place at the edge of the Centauri system, where a small Federation patrol encountered 3 alien vessels unlike anything in their databases. The Devourer ships were organic in appearance, their hulls seeming to pulse with unnatural life. They attacked without warning or communication, their weapons designed to drain energy from their targets rather than simply destroy them. The patrol ships were overwhelmed quickly, but not before they transmitted tactical data back to Federation Command. Jake Morrison led the response force. A mixed group of Federation and Exile vessels had arrived to find the Devourer ships feeding on the wreckage of the patrol. The sight was horrifying but also educational. The aliens didn't just destroy their enemies, they consumed them, turning matter into energy to fuel their endless hunger. The battle that followed was humanity's first real test of their new military capabilities. The Federation ships, still crewed by people who had been peaceful explorers months before, struggled to coordinate their attacks effectively. But the exile vessels moved with deadly precision, their crews drawing on centuries of combat training. "All ships, concentrate fire on the lead vessel," Jake ordered, his voice steady despite the fear in his chest. "Don't let them close to feeding range." The fight lasted only minutes, but it taught humanity crucial lessons about their enemy. The Devourers were powerful, but not invincible. Their organic ships could be damaged by concentrated fire, and they seemed to have trouble adapting quickly to unexpected tactics. Kate Johnson watched the battle from the bridge of the Defiant Dawn, serving as tactical coordinator between the Federation and Exile forces. She saw how the two groups of humans worked together in combat, their different strengths complementing each other in ways that neither could achieve alone. "The Exiles have the training and weapons," she reported to Admiral Rodriguez after the battle. "But Federation crews have something else. We're used to working with different kinds of minds, thinking in ways that our enemies might not expect." As news of the first victory spread across human space, something unexpected happened. The fear that had gripped humanity since the first attacks began to transform into something else. Not bloodlust or hatred, but determination. A quiet resolve that said their species would not go quietly into extinction. Dr. Lisa Carter found herself studying captured Devourer technology, trying to understand how creatures that had existed for millions of years could be defeated by a species that had almost forgotten how to fight. The answer, she realized, lay not in humanity's weapons or tactics, but in something more fundamental. They've conquered every galaxy they've encountered because they always face the same kind of enemy, she told Jake during one of their strategy sessions. Peaceful species that had to learn to fight when it was already too late. But we're different. We're warriors learning to be peaceful, not peaceful people trying to become warriors. The final preparations for the main Devourer invasion took place across human space. Shipyards worked around the clock to build vessels that had never been needed before. Training centers taught skills that had been deliberately forgotten. And in quiet moments, humans tried to hold on to the peaceful values that had defined them for 3,000 years. Pete Johnson stood in his fields on New Eden, watching transport ships carry young volunteers to military training centers. His daughter Kate was somewhere among the stars, learning to command warships and fight battles. The peaceful world he had known was ending, but perhaps something better would emerge from the conflict. The Devourers arrived in force 6 months later, their massive fleet darkening the space between stars. They expected to find another peaceful civilization, easy prey for their endless hunger. Instead, they encountered something they had never faced before, a species that could choose to be warriors when necessary, but had not forgotten how to be human. The war that followed would test every value that humanity held dear. But as Jake Morrison looked out at the fleet,